Currently Inked episode number 23 for November 25th, 2016 is brought to you by Nibsmith at nibsmith.com. Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the Pen Habit. Glad to have you back, as I always am, for another episode of Currently Inked. If you are here in the U.S., it is the day after Thanksgiving as I'm recording this, and hopefully I'm going to get it published today as well. Also known as Black Friday, the evil day. I'm not much of one for Black Friday shopping. I made that mistake once, at least going out. I'll do it online, but going out and Black Friday shopping, no. So many years ago when I was living in Utah, and this was right when flat panel TVs had just first come out and were first becoming popular. And, you know, they were $2,000, and this one store had them on sale for $300. So I got up at 3:30 in the morning. I went and waited out. It was like 15 degrees outside. It was freezing cold. I waited outside for an hour and a half. The store opened at 5 o'clock in the morning, and just as was starting to open, a bunch of people who had just been in their cars with the engines running to stay warm got out of their cars and cut in front of the line and straight in the store as soon as they opened the door. And there's a mom and her like 11, 12-year-old son standing behind me, and he just started screaming, "F you, blank, 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 blank," just screaming. And his mom standing there doing absolutely nothing about it. And I stood there in line and I thought, two thoughts. First of all, only here in the U.S. would we stand in line to get something we don't need at a price at a lower price, literally the day after being thankful for what we already have. The other thought was, well, this really isn't in the keeping with the Christmas spirit, is it? So I don't do Black Friday shopping. I'll go out this evening after the crowds have calmed down a little bit, because I like to go out and experience the hustle and bustle. But the morning stuff, nope, pass. Anyway, so not a ton of pen news this week from the last episode. It's been a fun week for me, short week at work, so lots of time to come home and play with pens. I am in the pen reset mode right now. I've had so many pens inked for so long. I wrote through like 8 pens, or I am finally hit empty on like 8 different pens this week. So I've got a backlog of stuff to clean. I haven't really inked up a bunch of new stuff, but it's yeah, so it's been good to have a couple days off. I'm getting caught up on my regular review videos. So I did want to tell you about one kind of special sale that's going on. So the folks at the Canalea pen company, so I picked up one of their pens at the DC show. I've shown it here on Currently Inked a couple times, and there'll be a review coming up in a couple of weeks. But they're doing a Black Friday through Cyber Monday sale of a new on their site. And the reason I bring it up, I don't normally, do, sale announcements for most people, but part of the sale is if you place an order over $275 with them, you get a free Inky Fingers pocket notebook variety pack. So you'll get a lined, a blank, and a currently inked journal, some Tomoe River pocket notebooks from Fountain Pen Day, Carrie from Fountain Pen Day, and then free shipping, or $15 off UPS shipping. So in any case, that's I thought that was kind of neat that they're using some of the bloggers' stuff as part of their they call it the Ohana gift package. Ohana means family, if you've seen Lilo and Stitch. So anyway, Canalea, Kanilea, penco.com, and I bring it up because it's shameless self-promotion, because they're also giving away some of the Inky Fingers notebooks with those that holiday pack. So anyway, let's dive into questions, shall we? I know we've got a bunch. They're starting to pile up a little bit, so I'm going to try to get through a bunch of them in this episode. Sam from Japan asks, I write letters to friends and family. I have a habit of selecting a pen based on who I am writing to. When I write to my dad, I always use a stub or italic nib. When I write to my mom, sister, or niece, I use a soft, fine, or flexible nib. When I write to my nephew, I always choose a broad-nibbed pen. Do you have any habits in your writing and pen selection that are quirky, or is it just me? So I don't do that. What I do, he said doo-doo. What I do is when I write letters, I usually use one pen per page. Because I like to show off different pens and different inks in letters. So when I write letters back, and usually I'm not a big fan of writing just like a page or 2 pages. Like if a letter isn't at least 3 or 4 pages long, it's not worth writing in my opinion. My thing, you know, I'm super appreciative of people and things like that. But if I'm going to sit down to write, I want to try to develop a connection with people. And so I tend to write longer letters. But I will do 1 letter per page, and I try to do really different inks. You know, it's like I'll do a dark blue, and then I'll do a green, and then I'll do an orange, and then I'll do a red. I don't want to have 4 different blue inks, you know. So that's my habit. I stick with it pretty much, and I have for years. That's kind of how I tackle it. So yeah, that's how I do my letters. This next question comes from Paul in Massachusetts, who says, considering what would be for me an ultimate pen purchase, leaving aside the aesthetics of the pen itself and just in terms of smoothness, juiciness, comfort in the hand, some degree of flex, and keeping up with long form writing, which would you choose, LB5 or the modern Deco Band with the gold flex nib, not the super flex nib? So in terms of degree of flex, if that's an important variable to you, go with the Deco Band, because you're not going to get any flex really in the LB5. You're going to get a little bit of bounce, but that's about it. The other problem with the LB5 for what you're talking about is LB5s use Sailor's miserable converters, which don't have a huge ink capacity. So if you're going to sit down and write, the Deco Band has a pretty substantial ink capacity. Now it's a gargantuan pen, the Deco Band is. So if you haven't had a chance to hold one or you don't like really big pens, that might be a little bit of a consideration for you. It is even bigger than the LB5. So I find the LB5 to be more comfortable in the hand, but the writing experience is going to be a little more pedestrian. It'll be a perfect pedestrian, but it won't be anything, you know, flashy with bounce and flex and that kind of thing. It's also, generally speaking, it's wet, but it's not juicy. So it's going to be a really consistent ink flow, but it's not going to be a super wet ink flow. So if you want that, I'd say lean toward the Deco Band. All right, this next question comes from Jonathan in Virginia, who says, how do you make the swabs on your ink swatches? So I use this product I found on Amazon. It was referred to me by a local pen friend of mine. They're called Bristol Artist Trading Cards, and they're a little bit taller, wider than business cards, but they're about the size of a business card, made of really thick watercolor style cardstock. They don't show off sheen super well because they're pretty absorbent, but they're really thick and they're really fountain pen friendly. So I use those. I buy them on Amazon. I think they're 20 or 25 in a pack, and I keep 2 or 3 packs around. And there are several varieties. I use the smooth variety. So that's what I use. And then to make the swatches, I dip a Q-tip in the ink, pull it out, and dip it a second time. And that second time really is the key, I find, because there's something about if you only dip it once, it doesn't get fully saturated. Then I will rub the Q-tip, just kind of, squeeze a little bit of the ink out just on the side of the bottle neck. And then I start at one end and I just, swab to the other end, kind of in a diagonal. And the reason I do that is because it shows what happens when the ink's really wet all the way down to when it's pretty dry. So that's how I do the swabs. And then I will either use a glass dip pen or I try to wait until I have inked a pen with that ink and use the pen that I inked to write the name of the ink on the bottom. And I've found that gives me very consistent results. If I follow that kind of from end to end, I know that I'm going to get pretty close to the same result every time. A lot of inks can be really particular about what color they are based on how wet they are. And if I do that trick with double dipping the Q-tip, squeezing the excess out, and then going from one corner to another, I find that I can show the entire range of the ink on every card. So that's how I tackle it. All right, so let's do a currently inked. So starting off with, this is one that I was in actually buying this chair. My old chair was creaking so much, so I went out to buy a new chair at the grocery store, or not grocery store, at the office supply store. And while I was there, I happened across this pen. Now, most office supply stores here in the US, especially the big chain ones like Staples or Office Max, their pen selection is fountain pen selection is, if there are any at all, which often there aren't, it's pretty lame. So I saw this, it was 20 bucks. I figured it's 20 bucks, let me give it a try. So this is the Cross Cala, and I'll put a backdrop on it here so you can get a slightly more in focus. So kind of a blue matte finish pen here with some silver colored hardware. I have it. It came with, it did not come with a converter. It only comes with a cartridge, and cross cartridges at that. So, you know, it's a black ink. I haven't used it hardly at all. I'm going to spend a little bit of time with it. So I don't want to give away too much because I don't have enough information to give you what my opinion is on it yet. I just thought it was kind of interesting. You know, I've not bought any of the really inexpensive cross pens from the office supply store, and I suspect that if someone's interested in fountain pens and hasn't discovered this huge online community yet, this might be the kind of fountain pen they would find first, so I wanted to give it a try. So keep an eye out for that. That'll probably be showing up early in 2017 is when I'm expecting that to show up as a review. All right, this next question comes from Marjan or Marianne. Sorry, I don't know how that's pronounced, from The Hague in the Netherlands. And asks, will it be possible to get your Inky Fingers notebooks from a distributor in Europe, preferably the Netherlands, of course, in the near future? Shipping costs being more than double the price of a notebook. He said, of course, I would order more notebooks, but I would prefer a distributor to do that for me. So I would love to have a European retailer carry my notebooks. I am totally open to that. At this point, I don't have any that have offered to carry the line. Here in the US, I've only got one retailer who's carrying the line, and that's Van Ness Pens. But if there are any European retailers out there who would like to carry the Inky Fingers notebooks, please contact me, penhabit@gmail.com. I'm happy to wholesale the notebooks to you, and we can figure out how to get that taken care of, because I would love to be able to ship product over so you can sell it locally there in the EU or in the UK, and hopefully cut down on some of those shipping costs. So yeah, if you've got a retailer in mind, go talk to them and say, hey, would you please carry these notebooks, and give them my information, and maybe we can get a bunch shipped over there. So there you go. All right, next question comes from Romeo in Indonesia, who says, I want to treat myself with a new pen at Christmas. I'm interested in a Montblanc 146 fine nib and an M800 blue fine nib. Which one is better from quality, price, etc.? I want to buy one of those pens and can't decide. I can't really answer that question for you. They're both fine pens. I think it's going to come down more to what you like. I personally like the Pelikans a little better. I find them more interesting to look at. I think the nibs are gorgeous. That being said, Pelikan's nibs have not been thrilling me of late. I've got to be real honest. I love the pens. I'm less enamored with their nibs since they moved nib manufacturing back in-house. So I think you are likely to get a more consistent but a more boring writing experience with a Montblanc. I also think the Montblanc styling is kind of yawn. So if you want something that's a little more interesting, I'd go with the Pelikan, but I would try to buy from someone who would be willing to take a look at the nib for you and make sure that it is adjusted to your preferences before you buy it. Or if you're comfortable doing that yourself, then I'd go with the Pelikan. So that's just me. You may have completely different preferences. This next one is from Becca in Minneapolis, who says, I have an ink care and maintenance question. On occasion, dried ink will form a crust on the lip of the bottle. Are there ramifications here? And when does an ink need to go down the drain? So Short answer is no. I don't think there are ramifications there. I think that crust is just dried ink, and if that crust were to fall back into the ink, chances are it would just dissolve back into the ink, and the ink would have a very slight increase in this in the dye to water ratio. I've got crust on the edges of most of my bottles. It's never caused me any problems, and I don't think it would for most people. The only thing that really signifies is that a little tiny bit of the water that was in the solution has evaporated. So if that were to fall back in the bottle, I'm sure it would reintegrate, and at some point you might need to add just a touch more water back in, especially if your bottle isn't airtight. But aside from that, I think you're fine. As for when an ink needs to go down the drain, ink can grow mold, or it can grow slime. It can get really, really kind of rotten sock scented. So if your ink is showing signs of life, it's time to let it go. And this is going to make some people unhappy, but I'm going to say this as well. If you don't like the ink and you can't give it to someone else, send it down the drain. Life is too short to use ink you don't like just because you have it. You know, I feel the same way. I was watching this gardening channel, Garden Answers, and she does a lot of gardening stuff. And she's like, if you've planted a plant you don't like, when it flowers and you're like, I don't like that much, rip it out and throw it away, put something else in. Life is too short to use stuff you don't like just because it's there. Assuming, of course, you can afford it. If you can't, obviously use what you've got. But if you can afford it, what I would suggest doing, if you've got an ink you don't like, this is me getting up on my soapbox, lest you can't tell, is go on to like the Reddit forums or FP Geeks and do a pay it forward. Package up all the ink you don't like and send it to someone who's just getting into the hobby, who maybe doesn't have the money. Yeah, I think that's, there's a lot of people who want to know, want to try the inks and stuff like that, but they just can't afford it. And so if you've got stuff you don't want, send it to people who might want it, or who might want to experiment with it, or send samples to all of your pen pals as you write them, and just, buy some sample vials and fill them to the top and send it out with your letters. So I think there's a lot of ways to get rid of ink you don't want. I'm probably about to do that to my own collection because, it's cool to have over 200 bottles of ink, but I only use about 50 of them. And, it makes for a nice backdrop. Really, these are more set dressing than anything else. Were I not doing these videos, I wouldn't have anywhere near this much ink because I just don't use most of it most of the time. So anyway, all right, let us dive into another pen. So with the Christmas season upon us, I thought it was time to do some Christmas pens. So you've seen, I think you've seen both of these before, but wanted to do a red and green. So here is the Classic Pens LM1. Stephen Brown posted a picture of his LB1 and LM1, LB5 and LM1 in his recently on Instagram and his Facebook page, and he's got them. This is the KN material. It's that diffusion bonded acrylic in that lovely red color. Just a gorgeous material. I didn't write what I inked that up with. Really quickly. One moment, please. And we're back. For the guy who makes the currently inked notebooks, you'd think I'd do a better job of actually remembering to use them, especially when I use them in these videos. Anyway, I have this pen inked with Diamine Red Dragon. Really pretty color. It's a very Christmassy red, I feel. Maybe a little dark for Christmassy red, but I prefer darker reds to the kind of the lighter reds. So nice ink, beautiful pen, red ink. It just kind of fit. All right, back to the questions once again. This next question comes from Ritzert. I hope I'm saying that correctly, from Holland, who says, 1 pen of $450 or 3 pens of $150? It depends. It depends on what you like. So for me, we go with 1 pen of $450 that I'd loved over 3 pens of $150 that I just liked. But it pen itself, honestly. If I could find a pen for $150 that I loved, one pen of $150 would be better than 3 pens of $150. So yeah, I tend to be of the mindset that it is better to spend more to get something you really love than to spend less and get more of whatever. So getting more is not as good as having a few things that you really love. I realize the hypocrisy of me saying that as I sit in front of a shelf of 205 bottles of ink. I get it, but but that has become my personal philosophy over the last couple of years: is get the stuff that you really love. Don't worry about getting everything. So there you go. All right, it's time to take a quick break from the questions and the pens to talk about the sponsor for this week's episode, Nibsmith.com. So Nibsmith.com is run by one Dan Smith, who I first was introduced to via the FP Geeks forum and his YouTube channel. And I will say, this LB5, this is all Dan's fault. I watched his review on this pen. I fell in love with it. I knew I had to have one, and now I have 4. So Dan, thanks for a fat lot of nothing. This is your fault. Actually, thanks. I love these pens. They're wonderful. Anyway, so I've been aware of Dan's pretty much since I really joined the hobby about 4.5 years ago. And in the last couple of years, Dan has really taken off as one of the new nib grinders out there who's doing really great work. He's known mostly for his architect grinds. He does a lot of those, especially at pen shows, where he started going as a nib grinder there at the show. And the architect grinds are the grinds, it's like a stub but turned like this. So the side to side are wide strokes and the up and down are very narrow. And he's become known for his architect grinds. But he's always worked on really, really high-end pens, very expensive Montblancs and Viscontis and things like that. So he has a lot of experience with those high-end pens. And if you're looking for someone who can do some good work, he's probably one of those folks for you. I know he's done some very expensive pens for Jonathan Deans of the Pen Economics blog, including, I believe, his Montblanc Hemingway, which is a ridiculously expensive pen. Very, very hard to find and track down these days. Anyway, in addition to doing a lot of nib work and really high-end nib work, Dan also retails pens, and he has recently started retailing Aurora and Montegrappa pens. And right now, there is a kind of not a special, but Montegrappa has recently reduced the price on their Passione pens, which are these beautiful pens with sterling silver and really lovely celluloids. I've shown one here on Currently Inked, the Zebra version of that celluloid. Review is going to be coming up in a couple weeks, and it's a gorgeous pen. They've just dropped the price on those by a big chunk, and so now Dan is offering those as well. And I hope I'm not speaking out of turn here, but I'm fairly certain that if you buy a pen from Dan, he will adjust the nib to your preferences for free before he sends the pen out. So if you are interested in picking up one of these new Montegrappa Passiones, and let me show you what they look like, because they're amazing. They come in these really cool boxes, and just a really nice, gorgeous pen here, sorry. Got to help you focus. We'll use my clapboard here as a backdrop. Really pretty pen, lots of silver. I don't know how well you can see that, but got that, kind of the striated stripes on that celluloid. Really neat clip, sterling silver section even. A lot of silver on this pen. It's a gorgeous pen. Now this is not a cheap pen. It's a pretty fancy pen, but it's lovely. Great 18 karat gold nib on it. But yeah, Dan is he's retailing these right now as well, and you can get the nib adjusted to your preference. Or even if you wanted him to grind the nib for you down to a stub or an italic or an architect, he could do that for you as well. So I'd say go ahead and head over to nibsmith.com. Now, right now he doesn't have those pens listed on his website, so you need to contact him, ask him about them. But if you're looking for a nice expensive high-end pen for a gift for yourself, and you want to make sure that someone works on the nib and make sure they adjust it to the way you want before you get the pen, Nibsmith.com is probably a really good way to go. There aren't a lot of retailers who have the same level of experience of adjusting nibs as Dan does. So I would encourage you to head over to Nibsmith.com, check out his services, contact him about picking up a Passione or one of his Aurora Optimas or one of those, and go from there. So thank you to Nibsmith for supporting this episode of The Pen Habit. This next question comes from V of the Valley in the San Fernando Valley in California, who says, have you thought about doing a review on the Parker Penman Emerald ink? What is a close alternative in your opinion? What about a segment on inks gone by and a modern or current alternative? Thanks. Interesting question. So no, I haven't, and there's a couple reasons why. First of all, I'm no expert on inks of the past. I've got several bottles of discontinued inks, but most of them I bought before they became discontinued. The Parker Penman Emerald I didn't even buy, someone sent to me. I love it, by the way. I probably won't ever do a full review on it though. And the reason why is I try not to review stuff anymore that isn't readily available. I've done that before in the past and people get upset with me because of it. And I understand their point. It's like, well, it's cool that you review, Caran d'Ache Grand Canyon, but I can't buy it. So why do I care? So Parker Penman Emerald is a gorgeous ink. I've never found an ink that is comparable to it. I think the closest ink in my collection that is comparable to it would be Diamine Sherwood Green, but it doesn't have the same sheen that Emerald Green has. That Penman Emerald does. So, as far as inks go, I'm just not really all that interested in going back and doing reviews of out of production inks. They're not as easy to find as out of production pens. They're kind of like the in the razor blade. Razor/razor blade conundrum that you have. It's like these are the razor blades of the fountain pen world. They're meant to be disposable. It's a commodity you use. It is not a permanent item that you can reuse over and over and over again. So I generally, I don't go searching out vintage inks. I don't use a lot of vintage inks. And I just don't have the experience or expertise to really say, this is a modern equivalent of this out of production ink that's been out of production for 20 years. So chances are I will probably never go down that road, simply because for most people you can't find this stuff, or if you do, it's really, really expensive, and so that's just an area that has never been of a whole lot of interest to me. Okay, this next question comes from Jurjen in the Netherlands. I think that's how that's pronounced. I'm getting a lot of name pronunciations here today that I'm not 100% sure how to pronounce, so I apologize. As you know, if you've watched my videos, I'm not great with pronunciations outside of English anyway. So for better or for worse, I am a product of the American education system, and we did not have good foreign language training in my school. We barely had foreign language classes, and they were miserable, and so I have never been great with languages other than English. In any case, Jurjen, again, hopefully that's right, asks, I'm new to the hobby, but enjoying your videos for a while now. Thank you. In one of your recent currently inked videos, you showed a very interesting red ink, but unfortunately I didn't write it down. So I'm looking for a nice dark/wine reddish ink. Can you name one? Also, can you name or show some of your personal favorite red inks? Thanks in advance. Red inks are interesting, and I don't know if this is, I was one of those kids who really, really tried to get perfect grades all the time, and so I have kind of like this reaction to red ink. The first thing I do when I'd get a teacher is scan it to see if there was any red ink anywhere. So I almost never use red ink except during the Christmas season. And I really only have a few reds that I like. One of them is the one I showed you earlier, which is the Diamine Red Dragon. I think that is probably my favorite red ink. It's the one I use the most. I also like Diamine Oxblood a lot, but that's more like a red-brown. And I go down those red-browns a lot. I don't go for like red reds very often. I go for red-browns or dark reds a lot. As for wine-colored inks, you might want to take a look at like Sailor Okuyama, which is it's almost like a burgundy, but with a really neat gold sheen to it. That's one that I like a lot. Let me just check here quickly. Quizzy does a nice, I don't know how well you'll be able to see this, does a nice maroon number 2, although that does have a pretty strong odor. Let's see, what are some other ones? The Sailor Yamabudo, or not Sailor, the Pilot Iroshizuku Yamabudo is one that also has a really neat gold sheen to it. It's kind of it's a little more purpley than wine colored. Just taking a quick look at some of the other ones. Yeah, I don't have a lot in my collection. So those are probably the ones I would recommend starting with. I'm sure other folks in the comments below who really prefer this color family would have a lot of really good options for you. I find a lot of red and these wine-colored inks to be really unsaturated and have kind of almost a dry quality to them, which I don't like at all. And it may just be the ones that I've tried, but most reds just don't do anything for me. So sorry I can't be more help on that question. This next question comes from Yukio, also in Holland. I don't know what's going on in Holland these days, or if it's all one person just posting under different names. May be how you can get all your questions answered. Sneaky. Traditional iron gall can cause damage to the paper because of its acidity, but what about modern iron gall inks like Quizzy, Diamine, etc.? Can they make the paper rot in the time span of one's life? So I am not a chemist, I am not an expert on this, but I will tell you what I think I know, with the caveat that I am not an expert, and so what I tell you may be completely off base. Wouldn't be the first time, I'm absolutely certain it won't be the last. Iron gall inks. So iron gall inks are generally on the acidic side. Where they can do damage to paper over time is in that acid, I believe, and they can kind of eat through paper. Modern iron gall inks are not anywhere near as acidic as old, true iron gall inks of ages gone past. They're much safer in your pens. They are much safer for the paper. Are they any safer than, or are they any worse than document inks? I don't know for sure, but my hunch is probably yes. My hunch is if you're really concerned about uber longevity with what you're writing, I would go with a document ink on acid-free paper over an iron gall ink. Iron gall inks, I think, are good for things like lettering envelopes and, a journal where a couple hundred years may be the most, all you're going to want out of it. I've talked about this before. Permanence of writing is not a huge thing for me. Maybe it's because I don't have kids, and chances are when I die, my journals are all just going to get burned anyway, thrown in the trash. But so I'm not an expert on this. I'm sure there are a lot of people out there who know a lot more than I do. But I'd say if you're worried about really, really long-term storage, if you're writing family records or things like that, I'd probably shy away from the iron gall inks, just on the off case that acidity could do some additional damage you don't intend. All right, last pen for this episode, then a few more questions, and we'll get it wrapped up here. So this, you've seen it before, I'm gonna show it again. My baby, the one that started it all. This is the Classic Pens LB5 Midorigi green. Gorgeous, 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 gorgeous material. Probably my favorite pen. It cycles between this and the purple one at the moment, and maybe it's, again, because it's Christmas time, but at the moment, this one is it. This one has the medium nib on it right now, and I have it inked with one of my favorite greens, Montblanc Irish green. Gorgeous green color, like it a lot. I think these two together make for a really nice lettering on Christmas cards and the like. So that's this time of year I always do one red and one green in a red and a green pen because I can. And then I figured, you know, the three of these together, I'm adjusting my RGB balance. Such a nerdy joke. All right, next question. This is from Austin in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, who says, I am enamored over the looks of Conklin pens. However, I hear mixed reviews about the quality. I was very interested in the Durograph and most recently the Nighthawk, an exclusive from Goulet Pens. Would you say that purchasing one of these two is a risk in any way? Do you think Conklin has improved their quality consistency in the past few years? Okay, so Conklin. Let's talk about Conklin. Conklin's been around, the name has been around for a long time. They were one of the big manufacturers back in the early 1900s, came up with a lot of really interesting innovations and then kind of disappeared. You know, like a lot of fountain pen companies, they didn't survive the transition to ballpoints. The name was purchased by a gentleman a couple of years ago who, if I'm trying to remember the story right, I may get some of the facts wrong, but was purchased by a gentleman. He kind of redeveloped the brand and then sold the brand to Jaffa, the US-based distributor for Delta, owner of Monteverde. Now they own the Conklin brand. The modern Conklin has absolutely nothing to do with the old Conklin, frankly. They're two different companies, two different styles of manufacturing. They use a lot of inspired designs. They bought the intellectual property so they can use some of the patents and things like that. I mean, anyone can use them these days, but but they've you know, got some of the trademarks that go along with that. So if you hear the term crescent filler, that is a Conklin trademark that cannot be used by other things. That's why Visconti calls theirs the arc filler instead of the crescent filler, because it's they can't call it the crescent filler. So Jaffa's pens, both Monteverde and Conklin, they don't use the quality of the pens themselves have been uniformly excellent, I believe. You know, I don't know where they're manufactured. Probably China is my guess. But with both companies, I have had a lot of problems with their nibs. When I first started in the fountain pen hobby, I got a Monteverde that I loved, the Invincia. And I got what was the other one? Oh, excuse me, the Monteverde, sorry, let me back up. I got the Impressa, which was a $40 pen. It had that gunmetal finish. I loved it. It was a great writer. I also got an Invincia with a stub nib. Now, I didn't know this at the time because I was still really new. I don't love stub nibs. It was a good stub nib. It just wasn't right for me. But I didn't realize that at the time, so I ended up not using it very much. Later on, I went through 3 Monteverde Primas, and they were all unusable. I got a Conklin Durograph, which I really liked the look of. The nib came in very poor shape. Fortunately, unlike with the Primas, I couldn't make those work. With the Conklin, it was just the tines were out of alignment, the nib needed to be polished. Once I did that, it wrote great, and I ended up gifting that pen to my father. He still uses it all the time, really likes it, loves the nib on the pen. So what I will tell you is I haven't tried a Jaffa, excuse me, I haven't tried a Monteverde or a Conklin pen in the last couple of years. I personally am a little leery about spending my money on those pens after I've had so many bad experiences. I know a lot of people buy the pens, really like them. I've also heard from a lot of people who have bought the pens and had issues. So what I would do is I would suggest, if you can, to ask whoever you buy one of these from if they could take a quick look at the nib to make sure that it is okay. Or buy from a company that has good customer service. If you can get one of those things, I think you're fine, with the expectation that you may run into issues with these pens because there are enough reports of quality control problems that I don't think it's just a one-off in my case. I think there is a little bit of a systematic issue there. Now, it could be that Jaffa has really worked on improving its nib quality control over the last couple of years, and I just don't know because I haven't tried the pens. That may very well be the case. I just don't have any way of knowing for sure. So if a pen calls to you, I say try it. Just try it from a company that will either check the nib for you and adjust it to make sure it works, or has a really good return policy or exchange policy if you get one that does not work the way you like. So hope that helps. All right, let's grab, let's see, yeah, we're running along today. I knew we were going to because I was going to try to get through some of these questions. Let's grab another question. Last one for this episode. This is from Nick in Iowa, who says, I found myself curious while looking at new stock on pen websites as to how the new Monteverde inks look and perform. Have you used the new inks or even the old ones for that matter? If so, how did they perform? Would you consider doing an ink review on one? Yes, I would. I've requested several samples of these inks from Van Ness Pens. They just got the whole line in recently. I don't know if it's up on their website yet. Some of the new colors look amazing, like super amazing. Now, I have heard through the grapevine, I've never used the old Monteverde inks. I've gotten a couple samples back when Goulets were still doing the ink drop. I got a couple samples from them that I didn't love, but they performed fine. I just didn't like the colors very much. The new colors look amazing, and I can't wait to get a hold of them. But I have heard through the grapevine that Monteverde's inks are made by the same factory that makes Montblanc inks, and I love Montblanc inks. So I'm seriously hoping that these new inks are as exciting as some of the Montblanc inks are, particularly some of the new colors that they're adding or that they've reformulated. I think there's a lot interesting there. I wish they used a slightly more attractive bottle. I think their bottles are really actually pretty unattractive, but I think they're very functional. So I will take an unattractive functional bottle over an attractive non-functional bottle any day of the week. So I will let you know when I get a chance to try them. Like I'm sure you've noticed on the channel, I don't do a lot of ink reviews. I actually hate doing ink reviews. I know people like them. I hate doing them. But I will probably do a couple of ink reviews on the Monteverdes just because they're so interesting. And at the very least, I'll talk about them here in Currently Inked, even if I don't do a full review. All right. I have yammered on long enough. I am starting to get parched, so I'm going to go get myself a nice warm beverage and sit on the couch and watch, I don't know, Cook's Country or America's Test Kitchen or something like that. I'm in a baking mood. I always get this way during the holidays. I am also, interestingly enough, and apropos of absolutely nothing we've talked about here, if I may paraphrase J.K. Rowling, I'm about to do what I've always threatened to do, which is to become roughly the size and shape of a large killer whale. So about a week ago, I finally, hit I'm nearly 40. It's time to get your life in order. That conversation with myself. So I'm back swimming, a mile and a half a day, 3-4 days a week, and eating healthily again. So I've got to get over to the gym at some point today and go do my laps for the day. I didn't get to go yesterday because of Thanksgiving, and I didn't get to go the day before because the pool was closed. So I got to get over there and get that taken care of too. And hopefully over the course of the next several videos, you will see me lose some of these unsightly pounds and inches that I have put on in the last 5 years as I have been sitting on my big fat can in front of the computer instead of doing physical activity. It is amazing how quickly one can put on weight when one is not dancing for a living anymore like I used to once upon a time. It's you look at pictures of me from 10 years ago when I was still dancing and I was about this big, and now I'm about this big. So anyway, there you go. Thank you so much for watching. We will see you here next time on The Pen Habit. Thank you. Have a good one.